Indeed, and a lot of people here in Hostages Square are holding up signs of these three men. All of them have relatives who have been very prominent at the weekly rallies that have taken place over the past 16 months to keep the hostages in the forefront of everybody's minds. There were claps and cheers as the first of the hostages became visible, Ohad Ben Ami, who was kidnapped from kibbutz Be'eri on the 7th of October. His wife had been kidnapped along with him, but was released in that first ceasefire deal, hostage for prisoner exchange, back in November 2023. And she has been a very present campaigner. People expressing shock at the physical appearance of these three men, saying that they appear very thin. You have also Eli Sharabi, who's 52, who's also kidnapped from kibbutz Be'eri. People have been saying about him that they're very worried because they believe that he may not know that indeed his wife and his two children were killed on the 7th of October in the safe room of the family's house. He may not know that his brother, who was kidnapped to Gaza along with him, has been killed. The Israeli military saying that was most likely in an Israeli airstrike on a building close to where he was being held quite early on in the war. And then you also have Or Levy, who's 34, kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival. His wife there was killed, and his family have been really holding out hope that he can be returned to be reunited with his little son, who's little more than a toddler, and hasn't seen his father, of course, for 16 months. His mother has been killed. So people here know the stories of these three men very well. They've been handed over to the Red Cross, playing such a key role in these exchanges that are taking place, hostages being freed. And then once these men get to the sort of edge of Gaza, they will be handed over to Israeli military forces. They'll be taken to an army base near kibbutz Re'im, not very far from where Or Levy was snatched on the 7th of October. There they'll be reunited with some members of their family. They'll have an initial medical assessment. And then, as we've seen with other hostages, they will be taken off for more thorough medical tests and to catch up with more of their loved ones at different hospitals in Israel. And at the same time, we are expecting this Palestinian prisoner release to take place in the coming hours. Already, Israeli military vehicles have been seen moving into the Offa military prison in the occupied West Bank ahead of this expected handover of something like 183 Palestinian prisoners to the Red Cross. About 70 of them said to be serving life sentences and long sentences, people seen by Israel as having blood on their hands in many cases. And then you also have more than 100 Gazans who have been detained by Israel during the war and mostly held without trial and without charge. This is all part of the process that we're expecting to see during the course of the coming hours.
Yolande, this is the fifth hostage swap for prisoners since the ceasefire began on January the 19th. Just describe what the atmosphere has been like over the past few weeks when these releases happen, and what the mood is there in the country, because this is giving a huge lift to these people in Israel who've gone through so much trauma. But what is the thinking now, the hopes about what will happen next?
Well, you heard behind me maybe a short time ago there was a cheer that went up from Hostages Square as these little strands of good news come through and people are watching a big screen here, watching a live news feed of everything that is happening. People really do take hope from the fact that after 16 difficult months, this long campaigning, they are still seeing hostages coming back alive from Gaza. But at the moment, we're also at a very critical stage, as people here are keen to point out to you. This is the point where we're supposed to now see in earnest talks taking place on the second, more sensitive stage of the ceasefire deal. These talks supposed to begin in the coming days, with an Israeli negotiating team flying off to Doha, with Qatar serving as a regional mediator. This stage of the deal is supposed to see a more permanent end to the fighting in Gaza, and in exchange, another 60, the remaining Israeli hostages coming back from Gaza. More than half of those currently said to be alive. They're male hostages, a lot of them Israeli soldiers. And people here know that this is a critical point. They're very worried that because of the state of his coalition government, that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu may not push in their minds enough for this stage of the ceasefire to bring home the rest of the hostages, their loved ones. And of course, Palestinians also extremely worried about this moment. And what has added to all the concerns in the past week are those extremely controversial comments by President Trump, which he has been sticking to, where he's talked about turning Gaza into a sort of international travel destination in the future, a US takeover, and moving away the some 2 million Palestinians who live there. That's something that Palestinians have totally rejected, that Arab countries have totally rejected as well. Many international powers also saying this is just not an acceptable idea. But it has really sort of on the far right in Israel in particular been something that has proven very attractive as an idea already before this was suggested by Mr. Trump. And, you know, people now feel that with that in the background, that could really make these second stage ceasefire talks even more difficult.